papers. All this he has contributed in his fruitful academic journey of 38 years. Recognizing his immense contribution to academics, NAC Bangalore has invited Dr. Deshpande as peer team member to assess and accredit number of universities and colleges in India. CSIBER is blessed and fortunate to have Dr. H.V. Deshpande as a member of its internal quality assurance cell IQAC committee at the institute. With such a wide academic and administrative and research experience in higher education, I am sure Dr. Deshpande sir is the right resource person to set the ball rolling for the Atal Faculty Development Program. I hope all the participants will benefit from his immense academic knowledge. Once again, on behalf of the CSIBER organizing team, I heartily extend a warm welcome to Dr. Deshpande for this session and request him to start the session. Thank you. Over to Dr. Deshpande, sir.
Good morning, all of you. The topic given to me for this presentation is higher education in India. New perception and perspective. I repeat again, higher education in India. New perceptions and perspectives. If you look at the very topic, you will find the topic is full of variety and complexities. I personally feel that such a kind of complexity and variety in higher education is a very serious matter for all of us to consider. Perhaps India may be the only country in the world having this kind of a unique system of higher education. And therefore, I personally feel to speak on the higher education in India, new perceptions and perspectives, is to enter in an area where angels fear to tread. Friends, we are all working in the field of higher education. Therefore, it is very, very imperative for all of us to enter the field where the angels fear to tread, to enter the field and to explore it, because we are looking forward to the implementation of NEP 20, and the future of India depends on the success of NEP 20. I shall discuss this topic by dividing it into three parts. Number one, very brief survey of higher education in India. Friends, it is entirely essential for us to understand. So, when we started and what we have done so far, and then I shall go to the second section of it, that is the NEP 20, some very important highlights. And the last section will be the issues of implementation. Perhaps again, I may speak for some few minutes about the prospectus of NEP 20. So this is the frame of reference, and I shall perform this kind of circus within the next 50 or 60 minutes. Friends, higher education in India can be divided into so many sections. The first few sections are only for our own information, and I only mention the titles and not discuss the very things because it is not expected here to go into detail. But we should know only the very eras or the periods of higher education in India. So number one, Vedic period. We know the system of ashramas were there. The Sandipani ashrama is entirely known to all of us. Then we come to Buddha Viharas, the monasteries, where education was imparted in the monasteries. Then we come to medieval period, that is with a very Muslim rule. And then we come to the colonial period, the British rule. I think we have to linger for some time to discuss this kind of a colonial period, because the colonial period has its own significance of significance of higher education here. So colonial period, British period, it is the beginning of the Western modern education in India. For me again, I personally feel that this is a kind of transformation from Indian higher education system to the very Western higher education system. And this transition is very, very significant for all of us. So this paradigm change, a departure from our native tradition to the very Western or English tradition, that is something which is very, very remarkable in the history of higher education in India. So the colleges in Calcutta and Madras in 1781, then the college in Banaras 1791, then the Elphinstone College, Bombay 1831, then Wood's Dispatch, very, very important document in the history of higher education in India. So Wood's Dispatch 1844, this is the Magna Carta of Indian education, and therefore it has got its own significance. And then 3 universities were established in 1857, Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. 28 colleges were affiliated to them, and most of the colleges were run by the Christian missionaries. That is also, I think, a very important thing to be noted by all of us. So the modern higher education in India started by the very Western tradition, by the British rulers, and it was initiated by the Christian missionaries. The DAV College, Lahore, was established in 1886. Then Aligarh Muslim University was established in 1920. The Sargent report, I think all of us know the very significance of this report. Sargent report in 1944 is a proposal of University Grants Committee, and it was established in 1945. I think the history of UGC goes back to the very recommendations of the Sargent report. So it was Sargent report that spoke about the University Grants Committee, not Commission. And then post-independence period, if we come to the very thing, independence of India, then we for the first time witnessed a very significant development, and that is in the form of Dr. Radhakrishnan Commission, 1950. University Grants Committee, it was converted into University Grants Commission, and that was again the very major step taken by the Radhakrishnan Commission, and it was accepted by the Government of India. Then the emphasis was on Indian cultural heritage. I want to emphasize this point. So NEP 20 has a very important and very significant root in the recommendations of the Radhakrishnan Commission and also in the recommendations of Kothari Commission. Both the commissions, they have emphasized the Indian tradition. I think this is very interesting to note that we have to go back to our own Indian roots. Even though I think we have a strong belief in the very Western system of education and the Western system of development of science. And therefore, so it is a kind of attempt on the part of the NEP 20 to have some kind of coalition or blending of the Indian values, Indian heritage, Indian culture, and the Western system of higher education. Then we come to Kothari Commission, drafted by J.P. Naik. I think the contribution of Dr. J.P. Naik to the higher education is just like the contribution of Dr. Ambedkar to the formation of Indian Constitution. So 1964 and 66. So Indian values and scientific attitude. So these were the very pillars on which the recommendations of the very committee, the Kothari Commission, they were best. So the blueprint of the higher education can be seen in the recommendations of the Kothari Commission, and therefore Indian education still was much to the recommendations of Kothari Commission. And we are proud that Dr. J.P. Naik is the architect of Kothari Commission report. Then we come to the next step, that is called National Education Policy 1986. A very rapidly, I think I am going to have the very brief survey of the history of education in India. So the National Education Policy, its report was reviewed by Acharya Ramamurthy Committee in 1991. Just see the very difference here. So the National Education Policy declared, I think, the very recommendations in 1986, and the report was reviewed by Acharya Ramamurthy Committee in 1989. So 3 years later. Then Janardhan Committee, 1991. It came with the program of action, POA, that is the short form of it, and it was, I think, discussed very widely in those days. So the program of action was published in 1992. That was the period of, I think, some radical changes in the economy of India. And at the same time, we were entering the very new world and entering into the very global era by that time, 1992. Then NAC and NBA were established in 1994. So this development is also very, very significant. We are talking about the very history of higher education in India and the establishment of NAC and NBA in 1994. So they are, I think, very, very important events. Up to that time, there was no agency at all to consider the real quality of higher education imparted in our universities and colleges. I must mention here that it was Dr. Sam Pitroda who is the architect of the NAC, because it was he who introduced the very idea of measuring or just, I think, assessing the quality of higher education in India. And the discussion was between the then Prime Minister, Mr. Rajiv G. Gandhi, and Sam Pitroda. Then the very system began to take its own impetus, and the NAC was established in 1994. Dr. Gowarikar Committee was the instrumental in the formation of NAC. Then establishment of 19 statutory bodies. It is also, I think, a very significant development in the history of education in India. The bodies were like BCI, then MCI, Medical Council of India, Bar Council of India, AICTE, NCERT. So there are the 19 bodies that they were established from 1947 to 1995. This is a long period, and over this period, so all these bodies were established and they were working. The only objection is that these bodies did not work in the way it was expected by the government of India and the people of India. You know the very history of Medical Council of India, Bar Council of India, AICT, and there were some problems in the very functioning of these bodies there. And then earlier there, Ambani Birla report was also there. It was, I think, published in 2000. So the Ambani Birla Committee report. And then we come to the National Knowledge Commission of Sam Pitroda. It is NKC. So the reports in the NKC, National Knowledge Commission, submitted the two reports, reports in 2005 and 2006. I think it is a major development in the history of education in India. For the first time, we can find that Sam Pitroda was recommending the winding up of the 19 statutory autonomous bodies and an independent higher education authority. That was the very idea. So he wanted to abolish UGC along with the other statutory bodies. and he wanted to form a new kind of authority for the regulation of higher education in India. That was a very, very bold step. Then we come to Yashpal Committee report. That was in 2009. Yashpal Committee suggested the National Commission for Higher Education and Research. That was the title of the very apex body suggested by Yashpal Committee. Then we come to the next, that is P.M. Tandon Committee report on deemed to be universities. That is a very significant part. Again, I want to mention it slightly here. So out of 126 deemed to be universities, only 44 needed radical improvement. And then the 44 deemed universities were worth closing down at that time. So 44 out of 126 deemed to be universities, they were asked to be closed down. So that was the scenario of higher education in India at that time, by the end of the first decade of our 21st century. Then we come to the next, that is a Planning Commission to RUSA, that is in 2013 with SAP, Special Assistance Program. So RUSA was introduced and it was much discussed, and some universities and colleges were benefited by this kind of RUSA provisions. Then there came the Hari Gautam Committee report. It was in 2014. Then came the TRS Subramaniam Committee report. It was in 2016. Then Niti Aayog was asked to review Hari Gautam Committee report. Just again, the reports were submitted, and again the reports were reviewed by some other committee. So that is the tradition of higher education in India. Then next we come to PMO, and Niti Aayog submitted a report known as a HERA. So Higher Education Empowerment Regulatory Agency in 2017. Just see again, this is the government move. PMO was, I think, involved directly in proposing some kind of a system in higher education in India with the help of the Niti Aayog, and that was called the HERA. Then we came to the HRD proposed Higher Education Commission of India, repeal of UGC Act 2018. Just again, commission after commission, committee after committee. And then out of 14 members, 9 were top bureaucrats and 5 others. That was the very constitution of the Higher Education Commission of India, repeal of UGC Act 2018. Just see, it was a bureaucratization of higher education policy making process and its implementation. Friends, I have some request to you. Please consider the part played by bureaucracy in the policy making procedure of higher education in India in the last 70 years. That is a topic for serious concern, and that is a topic I personally feel is a fit for the research work. Then NEP 2090, that is the Custody Rangan Committee report was there. Again, when I went through the very Custody Rangan Committee report, I found that it was a highly bureaucratic affair. So the suggestions made by Dr. Custody Rangan, the suggestions were giving at most upper hand to the very bureaucratic setup, and also the ministers in the very cabinet there. So that is the very important feature of Custody Rangan Committee. But here I must mention, I must thank Dr. Custody Rangan Committee members that it was full of the very vision of higher education, which will be really beneficial to the very future generations of India. Then we come to the present NEP 20 Central Cabinet decision in July 2020. This is very important thing. And we are all concerned with this kind of NEP 20 because of the future of future generations really depends on the success of NEP 20. If you have the very review, I have mentioned only the very important landmarks in the history of our education. And I have mentioned only 17 committees and commissions only. There are so many others also. I have no time again to discuss all the very committee reports and the very commission. But again, these 17 important events were, I think, mentioned by me. And then I come to the question. A number of committees, a number of reports, and a number of reviews of the reports in the last 70 years, leading to indecision and a bureaucratic upper hand. I know what I say, and I know again every part played by bureaucracy in the history of higher education in India. There may be, I think, some excuses there, and they may have their own case to argue. We do not know their own predicament and their own ailments in the very government. But this is the very history. And therefore, again, henceforth, when we try to implement NEP 20, I personally feel that the top bureaucracy of India and the great educationist academia or the academic persons in India, they should sit together, think together, draft together, act together, and implement together. What do I mean? I mean that the equal contribution of the academia and the bureaucratic people should be ensured in future. That is entirely essential for the success of NEP 20. This should not be a kind of a one-sided game. And therefore, the cooperation of all the stakeholders of higher education, it is entirely essential for the success of NEP 20. Will NEP 20 stop this kind of repetition of commissions and committees and reports? The answer is not as easy as it appears to be. NEP 20 needs to be considered against this bleak background of history of higher education in India, especially after the independence. Then I come to the very second part of my presentation, and that is NEP 20, some highlights. It is entirely obvious that I cannot discuss or mention each and every aspect of the NEP 20, but only highlights can be just mentioned in this presentation. So no affiliation, that is very important thing and very important step taken by the NEP and even by the Custody Rangan Committee. Thanks for this kind of, I think, very bold step. So all higher education autonomous institutions, only 3 types of higher education institutions. Number 1, research universities. Just see, I think, how bold the step is. Secondly, the universities with research and a high quality of teaching. And the third, high quality teaching autonomous higher education institutions of multidisciplinary program by 2030. In the next 10 years, in the next 15 years, so we shall have only autonomous higher education institutions. The very word affiliation should be completely debarred from the system of higher education in India. So autonomous universities and autonomous multidisciplinary colleges. So that will be the very setup. And this setup will be entirely new. And this setup has got some very, very important features or characteristics which are very important for us, for all of us. There shall be by 2030 at least one large multidisciplinary higher education institution in or near every district. This is, I think, a very important thing. Within one night, you cannot have any kind of reform. It will take time. And the complexities and varieties, you know, in higher education institution in India, system in India, we require some time. And the present government, though the government is entirely in hurry to implement the NEP 20, still the government is considering the due time for that. And it is said by the government that by 2040, the NEP will be really established in Indian higher education system. And therefore, so to establish at least one multidisciplinary college in one district or near the district, that is the planning, you know. I think there will be long consideration, a long thought should have been given to the very idea. Otherwise, again, this kind of policy should not have taken any shape. Then we have all ODL, open distance learning programs, and they will be of high standard and will be suitably integrated into the curricula of higher education institutions, and the blended mode will be preferred. This is very significant. I would like to make just one comment here. If the open distance learning programs, that means again the very curriculum, is to be, I think, made with a great standard on par with the very quality standards of higher education institutions in the world. That is the aim. That is a rather difficult thing at present, you know. We have, I think, some experience of BOS in various subjects in various universities. What we do in the very BOS, we know. There is no, I think, need to make any comment. And therefore, the curricula should be entirely improved. And at the same time, the open distance learning programs should have been with the very high standard, should have been of the very high standard, I think on par with the very educational standards of the world. And therefore, this ODL and the regular classroom, they should be blended together, and the system of the credit bank is attached to it. So this is a kind of, I think, novel idea, and we did not think about it in the very past. So ODL, open distance learning, regular classroom learning, and the credit bank. So all these things are to be integrated together, and that will be again the main aim or objective of the NEP 20. Single stream higher education institutions will expand themselves by adding new disciplines or be a part of multidisciplinary higher education clusters. At present, we cannot view exactly and completely the very nature of the very multidisciplinary higher education cluster or the institution. But that is contemplated by the experts. And perhaps again, within 10 years, we shall have the picture of the multidisciplinary higher education clusters or institutions very clear. Then the next very important characteristic of NEP 20 is the holistic multidisciplinary education will aim at developing all capacities of human being. I think this is deceptively simple. My personal view is that this is deceptively simple. It is not as simple as it appears to be. But just see the very aim. So it is the developing all capacities of human beings. And they have mentioned the very capacities to be developed. So intellectual, aesthetic, social, physical, emotional, and moral in an integrated manner, all round development of the students. We have been talking about these things for a long time. But now this is the era in which we have to implement what we were talking about. And therefore, this provision of a holistic multidisciplinary education is very significant for all of us. Friends, who is going to do it? That is a very important question, significant question in my mind. Henceforth, the people in the universities and colleges and the higher education institutions, they will not have any scope to blame the political leadership, because the curriculum development, teaching, learning in the class, integration of the so many elements in higher education, so all these things are to be performed, to be created, to be performed, and to be supervised by academic people only. And therefore, again, we cannot and should not shirk our responsibility in future. So the era of blaming the political parties and political leaders is, I think, now over. And the next generations will blame the academic people if they are not coming forward and doing their duty and showing their accountability towards the development of the very future generations. Then we come to the very Department of Languages. and literatures. Just here again, the vision of NEP 20, thanks to Dr. Kasturi Rangan committee, because they aim at developing all the very arts and all the social sciences also along with the very natural sciences. So they say that the languages are very important, literatures are very important, and the aim is to introduce Indian literature, the literatures in Indian native languages to the very world. That is a very important and significant aim of the NEP 20. So the music, philosophy, Indology, art, dance, theater, education, science subjects, social sciences, then sports, translation and interpretation. So all these things are under the umbrella. And all these skills and all these faculties are to be developed in the near future. Just see the very wide range, the very wide, the variety and the very vision of the NEP 20. Then it will be given all of the, yes, then credit will be given to the very programs, and these credits will be transferred to the, for the very first degree programs if they are done from such departments or through ODL mode. To my mind, again, the question is very significant. At one place, in one higher education institution, you cannot have all these things together. So philosophy, dance, music, and mathematics and chemistry, you cannot, I think, teach all these things at a time. And therefore, you have to depend on some other higher education agencies and institutions. And therefore, so one student can go to several institutions. I think even some of them will be from ODL. And then he will get the credit, and the credits will be transferred to his own account. That is a very novel idea, you know. Then we come to the next. The flexible innovative curricula shall include credit-based courses and projects in the areas of community development, environmental education, value-based education, and global citizenship education. Just see the very range. So these are the very courses, and the courses we will have to prepare the very courses for environment, for social work, for moral values, and for global citizenship. I think the word is deceptively simple, global citizenship. And that is, I think, a very important task before the academia and all those stakeholders who are concerned with higher education system in India. Then we come to students of all higher education institutions who will be provided with opportunities for internship with local industry, business, artists, craftsmen, etc. As well as to the research internship with faculty and with other research institutions and industry also. I think the emphasis is on the practical experience here. Hitherto, the classroom teaching was only a kind of paperwork and again oral work there. But now again in NEP 20, the emphasis is given on the practical experience, and students will have to, I think, undertake some projects. They will have to go to the industry, to the research institutions, and to the environmental projects there. And therefore, the all-sided development of the student is aimed at. Then a model public university for holistic and multidisciplinary education at par with IITs and IIMs. So that is also, I think, a very important aim. So it is called MEHRU. MEHRU is very important. So multidisciplinary education and research universities, that is the meaning of MEHRU, will be set up to attain highest global standards. Just again, the try is to come up to the level of the very global higher education institutions. And therefore again, so our institutions and our higher education institutions should be on par with the very great institutions in the world. And therefore, the idea of MEHRU is very, very significant. I don't have any time to comment on this concept of MEHRU, but again, this is a very significant idea before us. Then we come to higher education institutions who will focus on the research and innovation by setting up startups, then incubation centers, technology development centers with a greater industry academic linkages, including interdisciplinary research in humanities and social sciences also. So this is also, I think, a very important step. Then we come to the next. So National Research Foundation. I am very, very, I think, hopeful, and I am very glad I think, to see this kind of provision in the NEP 20. There was no, I think, order. There was no any kind of discipline to the very research work in India up to this time. But the research work in India will be given some kind of discipline, some kind of, I think, the frame of reference, and it will be entirely linked with the sustainable development of the Indian society. And that is very important. Those who are genuinely interested in undertaking research for the sustainable development of society. So such, I think, proposals will be scrutinized by the authorities. Here, I think some kind of precaution is necessary. So those who sit in the very selection committee, those who, I think, just grant the very proposals, and those who are supervising the very research work, they should not be, I think, they should not work just like the top bureaucracy that work in the last 70 years. So it is the highest responsibility of the people who sit at the National Research Foundation Center, and all the, I think, 4 committees working under this kind of foundation. So they will have to take care that how to develop the research for the betterment of Indian society. I don't have, I think, any time to make any more comments, but again, this is entirely essential. Then National Education Technology Forum. Just again, the provision is very, very important because all depends on the technology. Henceforth, the technology will play a very significant role in the development of higher education in India. And therefore, all the higher education institutions in future will require a greater number of technological support. And that support will be created and will be supplied by the very National Education Technology Forum there. And therefore, this is a very welcoming gesture. Then we come to next, the National Skills Qualification Framework. So NSQF will be established to align Indian standards with international ones. I think that was the very big question before NAC, when the NAC was I think established in 1994. So whether the graduation in Indian universities and colleges, they are on par with the very graduation other developed universities and colleges in developed countries there. How to measure the quality? That was the very big question, you know. And efforts were made by many countries in the world to have, I think, this kind of arrangement, where how to, I think, judge, how to weigh, how to, I think, accredit the qualifications and the quality of education of the graduates. Now again, this body will see that the Indian graduates will be on par with the other graduates in other developed countries there. And therefore, this is a very big task, you know. On one hand, they will have to collaborate with the very NAC, NAC, not NAAC, because in the very new setup, it is NAC. And the work of NAC will be different from the work of NAAC, NAC at present at Bangalore. And therefore, so NAC and again the National Skill Qualification Framework, they will have to work hand in hand. And therefore, this kind of cooperation is entirely essential, and that is not as easy as it appears to be. Next, NEP 20, the NEP 20 higher education regulatory system. There are 4 functions, you know, of higher education, and therefore there are 4 apex bodies to look after these 4 major functions of higher education in India. Number 1, the apex body is Higher Education Council of India. That is the very highest body. And then the next is regulation, accreditation, funding, and academic standards. These are the 4 functions of our education. And the four apex bodies are National Higher Education Regulatory Council, and excluding the medical and legal section of the higher education, having education powers. I think I want to clarify these two things there. So in the NEP 20, medical and again legal education is separated, and all other kind of education is brought under the umbrella of NEP 20. We do not know much about the medical and law education in future, because that is in the making now. It is under consideration. But this National Higher Education Regulatory Council will have very great power, you know. So education powers are given to the very body, and therefore all disputes of all sorts will go to this body, and this body will have the very justice. And again, therefore again, this body is very important, and therefore the constitution of the very body, the functioning of the body, the rules and regulations within which the body has to work, these things are to be things seen very carefully. Otherwise, the justice in higher education will not be imparted. And if at all the justice in higher education is not imparted properly, then again NEP 20 will have a kind of, I think, a difficulty. And therefore, all depends on the accountability and performance of the National Higher Education Regulatory Council. And this is to be taken into consideration by all of us. Next, National Accreditation Council. I have just now mentioned here. So, National Accreditation Council, that will be different from present NAC. So, appropriate number of higher education, high quality higher education institutions will be selected for accreditation work. That is a problem, you know. Here we have some kind of problem. NAC has a long experience of how our higher education institutions in India work with NAC. The history is not very encouraging, please. So we have developed some devices, universities and colleges in India, to deceive NAC peer teams. That is openly accepted by NAC. There is no secret at all. If this is continued, then again the whole thing will be having some kind of problem. And therefore, if NAC is not able to control this kind of a thing, evil practices in accreditation, will it be possible for so many higher education institutions having the power of accreditation to, I think, bar the corruption and other practices, ill practices from the very procedure? It depends on what we are. Indian people, they need to have a very serious introspection, what we are and what we are going to be, to become. And if we do not think about it today, then we will not stand in the world tomorrow. And therefore, the accountability, sincerity, and the ethical behavior on the part of the stakeholders of higher education in India is of a very vital importance for all of us. Then, National Accreditation Council, then graded accreditation will be established within 15 years with institutional development plans. That is, I think, a very important thing. 15 years are given to the very higher education institutions to become autonomous and to obtain the graded autonomy. Here also again, how to design the very procedure of graded autonomy is also, I think, a very serious thing. And no political man will come here to define and again to draft this kind of, I think, system. And therefore, the role of academia in future is very important here. The graded autonomy system, it is to be looked after very carefully. And therefore, this is very important thing. And with institutional development plans, I think the grants will be given to the higher education institutions on two criteria. Number one, so the grade given by the NAC authorities to the very higher education institution, number one, and secondly, the institutional development plan. I think I don't have any time again, but this is for the first time in the history of India that some kind of authority is given to the very higher education institutions and the managements of higher education institutions in the very in the field of economic aid, because up to this time it was UGC who was, I think, deciding the very heads of granting the economic aid, financial aid to the higher education institutions. So what higher education institution demands, it was not considered by the UGC up to this time. That was a serious mistake. And this mistake is rectified today in the form of NEP 20, because grants will be given to the higher education institutions on the proposal made by the institution itself. And therefore, the College Development Council and the Institutional Development Plan, that will be, I think, the best for granting the financial aid to the very colleges. This is a very important step. This is a very important change. And I think that is the very important change in the form of democratic way of decision making there. The highly centralized system is now becoming decentralized, and that is a kind of a welcoming gesture for all of us. Next, the Higher Education Grants Council. I think that is the second name of the UGC. But grants linked with the accreditation grade and IDP and its process. For the first time, you know, this, I think, independence is given to the higher education institution. Then we come to the number 4, General Education Council, GEC. And this will frame learning outcomes, graduate attributes, and will form national higher education qualification framework. This is very important thing. When these, I think, 17 or 19 apex bodies who are working up to this time, so they were having some regulatory authorities. So Medical Council of India, Bar Council of India, AICT, and the people in India, they are not very happy with the performance of this thing. And therefore, the regulatory authority of these bodies is taken away from them. And they are now asked by NEP 20 to, I think, look after only the upgradation of the very curricula, the syllabi, and so only the academic work is given to them. And they are called PSSB. So that is very important thing here. So statutory bodies will be only professional standard setting bodies. Professional standard setting bodies. That is called PSSB. And B, the members of GEC. That means again, the General Education Council. So the members of General Education Council will be the very apex bodies, you know, AICT and Bar Council of India, etc., etc. 17 or 19 bodies are there. So they will not have any regulatory role. This is a major change. And, you know, the managements and the higher education institution principals will be very happy if, I think, the change is for the better. All the 4 bodies will work with transparent public disclosure. That is also a very important thing. Everything should be on the website, you know. There will not be any scope to hide anything there. And therefore, Central Advisory Board of Education is again a new body, you know. That will be a permanent body. And that Central Advisory Board of Education will work continuously. And the members will be, I think, replaced according to the rules and regulations there. But that body is very significant in the context of NEP 20, because that will supervise the entire quality of higher education in future. The present question is whether these apex bodies will be formed according to the Kasturi Rangan Committee recommendations. If so, there will be a number of problems and hurdles. The very constitution of Higher Education Council of India will be opposed, as it is dominated by bureaucrats and ministers, giving little voice to our academicians. I speak only on the basis of the recommendations of Kasturi Rangan committee. And therefore, I have one question in my mind. Whether all the recommendations of the Kasturi Rangan committee have been accepted by the government of India, or there are some, I think, major changes in the very committee reports. That is very significant, I think, question before us. And therefore, we have to, I think, see the difference between the new things and again the things mentioned in the Kasturi Rangan committee report. And that is not yet clear. We are eagerly waiting for that. And then I come to the very last part of it, that is number 3. So the following ambiguous issues are there, and these issues require further clarification. So at present, the issues are there, but the clarification is not given by the government of India. And therefore, we are eagerly waiting for the arrival of the guidelines, clear-cut guidelines, and the instructions from the government of India. Now again, we have to call the Minister of Education, no HRD, but MOE. So the exact details of the formation and rights and duties of the authoritative bodies, these are 4 apex bodies, that is very important here. Then the process of conversion of affiliation into autonomy and the procedure of graded autonomy will be also a kind of question. I don't have, I think, time. The time is up now, and therefore, so I shall leave it to you to consider, because here also your cooperation is needed. So the process of conversion of affiliation into autonomy, no political man, no political leader will do it. Only the academic people will have to do it. And therefore, their accountability and their role is very significant in this regard. Then the conversion of a single faculty college higher education institution into the multidisciplinary higher education institution or cluster is also a very, very complex matter. And the modalities have to be, I think, sought out, and these are rules and regulations and frameworks and procedures, they have to be laid down. Here also, the role of academic people is very, very significant, and it is their duty to lay down the formation of these systems and procedures. Then credit bank system, centralized and institutionalized. I think this is not very easy, but again, the technology is so developed that again, I don't have any kind of doubt that this credit bank will work just like the very, I think, our banking system. And we hope that again, there should not be any kind of I think, trouble, some grievances on the part of the students, because it is a matter of dealing with their future. And therefore, accuracy is very important in the functioning of the credit bank. Then we come to the state-center relationship. The present political scenario of ethos is not a very encouraging, you know. So at present, all the states and territories in India have some kind of meaningful cooperation with the Ministry of Education of the central. Otherwise, again, NEP 20 will not that the political scenario doesn't create any kind of layer in the mind of the will have full implementation of NEP 20 with the center. That is a major issue. And the survival of Indian people in the global knowledge imperialism. And therefore, so the states have to, I think, consider the significance of this new policy, and again keep aside the very political matters and have a meaningful cooperation with the very center there. That is what I want to say. Then next year, new accreditation structure will have to be, I think, very, very carefully formed. The evil elements in the very accreditation process should be completely eradicated. And here, everything depends on the academia, because they are involved directly in the process of accreditation. And robotization, artificial intelligence, World Technical Order. I can repeat again. World Technical Order, employment problem, and Indian higher education in the context of present Indian political ethos. That is the scenario I want to define in these words, and that is the scenario over which we have to ponder, and again we have to give a long thought to it, and again plan our future activity cooperation to NEP 20. Then I come to the very last part of it, that is the prospects. Government plans to prepare two documents explaining NEP 20 implementation, first for school education and equip for education. They will provide complete plan of action and will be prepared in consultation with the State Council of Higher Education. I repeat, will be so equip document for the higher education will be prepared by the Government of India in consultation with the state councils of higher education. And therefore, for the first time, all the states, they are required to form the state councils of higher education, and they will have to, I think, establish a meaningful dialogue with the authorities, and then the document called equip will be prepared. It will take some time. I don't think I know it very well, but we are very eagerly waiting for the document called equipment. We now urgently need the exact script of the equip, world technology order, plus Indian traditional culture and human values. I think this is something very important in the context of NEP 20. So it is a NEP 20. What is it? In one sentence, I will say that NEP 20 is the combination of Nalanda and Harvard. We require Harvard, we require Nalanda, Takshashila, and the combination is to be seen in NEP 20. So the new era of innovation. I have been talking about the very role of academia. It is here again what I want to say. So implementation of NEP 20 requires new laws, new mindsets, new systems, and new procedures, new curriculum designing, new administrative setup, then the reconstruction of rules, regulations, new combinations of many things, new financial system, new styles of educational management, new methods of recruitment, then teacher and staff training, new ICT, new publications also. We are required to provide these new things to the government of India by way of our innovations, research, and creativity. That is the very, I think, responsibility of the academia, and I hope that the academia will come forward and render the very due help to the very government of India. One such a new requirement is of the new system of academic and administrative audits in the light of the NEP 20. Friends, I have prepared a new draft of a AAA, academic and administrative audit, and soon it will be published. I think that will be my own modest contribution to the development of higher education and to the implementation of NEP 20. I appeal all of you to come forward, to innovate, and to contribute to the building of the new higher education system. NEP 20 will have to face many hurdles, difficulties, even act of opposition also. It is for all of us to steer clear in this new navigation because it is now or never. It is a matter of our survival in the global context of global knowledge imperialism. That is my phrase. We have to survive in the global knowledge imperialism. The greatest challenge before our academia is to reform the curricula according to global standard and to implement it in the new teaching systems. ODL, open distance learning, and again classroom learning should be blended together. The successful implementation of NEP 20 will provide meaning and true sense to our sovereignty and independence. After 70 long years, we are going to give a definite meaning to our sovereignty and to our independence in the form of NEP 20. And therefore, that is the way of becoming Atmanirbhar Bharat. NEP 20 is the future of our future generations, full of their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations. The only formula to achieve that goal is the mantra: reform, perform, and transform. Friends, I do not know how have I performed in this circus. I am grateful to the cyber. I am grateful to cyber authorities for giving me an opportunity to have a dialogue with you. I think nowadays people do not hear the others. You have, I think, given to me your ears for a long time, and for that I thank you for your presence and
for your
your
patience.
patience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You have given a very excellent overview about, yeah, uh, excellent overview about the evolution of the educational regulatory authorities, the philosophy of education in the pre-independence era, and at the same time you have given an excellent review about the institutions which have been regulated, which have been created over in the post independence period to regulate and improve the higher education system in India. You also pointed out the various limitations, various drawbacks of all these institutions, and you have highlighted the need for a new education policy which has been discussed by you in greater detail. The key words and the key focus areas of the new education policies have been highlighted by Dr. H.V. Deshpande. As in my introduction, I said he is a renowned academician and academic administrative expert who has been working in this field for more than 38 years. And during his course of his presentation, we could easily see that he is speaking with his experience and not just sharing some of the information which is already there. He has worked in the system, he has experienced the system, and as a result of which, he knows the past, he knows what is going on, and he knows the direction in which the education system has to be taken forward. So I thank him for an excellent, comprehensive presentation of the entire, you can say, the topic given to him in a very brief time of less than an hour. So I now open the forum for the question answer session. It will be good for us to handle if at all the participants can put their questions in chat box so that we can have an interaction with our resource person, Dr. H.V. Deshpande sir. So participants can put their questions in the chat box.
Let us have a pre-discussion.
Yeah.
Please free to ask any question in this conference.
Hello, good morning, sir. This is Priyanka Kumari.
Yeah, please go ahead, Priyanka Kumari ma'am.
Yes, sir. Sir, I wanted to know about design education in India. Like, hello.
Yeah,
Sir,
yeah.
I wanted to know your views about design education in India.
I cannot hear loudly, please.
Yeah, I'll just read out.
He will repeat the question. Yes.
Yeah, sir.
Okay.
The question is relating to the design education in India. Design education in India. Can you be more elaborate, ma'am?
Yeah.
What exactly is the question you are trying to pose?
Yeah, sir, in past we have seen that for different subjects, discipline, there has been different regulatory authorities like AICT, AIMA. So similar to that, we didn't had anything in design education. So what is the scope of design education, how it has been looked forward in NEP? Because nowadays lot of institutions are coming forward for in design field. So how it has to be done?
Yeah, that is a very big question, before NEP 20. And uh, I thank you very much for pointing out this very important activity before us. There are two main things I would like to mention. Number one, all the bodies, like AICTE, Bar Council of India, Medical Council of India, then again Ayurvedic Council, Agricultural Council. There are so many councils, 18 or 19 councils were established between 1945 to, I think, up to this day. And their regulatory independent working or functioning is entirely abolished. And they are brought together under the General Educational Council, Educational Council, GEC. And therefore, they will sit together and they will prepare the syllabi, the curriculum, and they will take into account what is going on in the field on the global level. And therefore, for the first time, they come together, and instead of, I think, regulating the institutions, they will look after only the syllabi, the curricula, and the standard. So that is number one. So designing of the very curricula is a major part, and again, all depends on the success of this kind of reformation of the curricula. And therefore, I request all of you again, the learned professors, and again, the people who have put in a long service in the higher education institutions, to come forward to make some suggestions to the very PSSB. So the PSSB is waiting for some suggestions, and again, because it is their duty to reform the very curriculum there. So I request you and the others also to come forward and again to suggest some kind of ways and means and some rectifications in the very curriculum. That is what we can say at present, because we do not know what will happen to the very system PSSB in the very next few years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your excellent answer. There are a number of queries which are there in the chat box. So I will be taking up one or two randomly. The one question posed by Prakash Nair is about what about international universities coming to India?
Yeah, that is a very important question.
International universities coming to India. What about them? Please highlight some of the issues.
That is a very significant question. Thank you for that. I request all of you again, especially to you again, who has put the question. There are some other areas also in which we have invited the very foreign funding there. And therefore, if we analyze the very events in the last 5, 6 years or 10 years, then you will find that the foreign the investment has come to India, and there was a kind of competition. There has been a kind of competition, and it is, I think, very heartening and very important thing for all of us that Indian people, they have stood, I think, in the very competition, and even though there was tough competition with the very foreign investment and again foreign companies, we have done again our duty in a remarkable way. I think the same thing will happen in the field of education. And therefore, if at all there is no any competition to us, our people will not improve. And therefore, some institutions, foreign universities will come here. And again, there will be some kind of give and take. There will be some kind of communion. And again, there will be some kind of fair competition there. And we shall learn so many things from them. And again, we shall improve ourselves. And soon a day will come that we shall be on par with the very famous universities in the world.
Yes, thank you, sir. Definitely, I think the foreign universities coming to India will be a good addition, so that the level of competition among all the Indian universities and institutions are going to improve. There are a number of queries on the chat box relating to the sharing of the PPTs. So all the participants, rest assured that it is our duty to share all the PPTs of the presenters, So during the course of our program, we'll be sharing it. And at the same time, the entire recording is being done of the session. So not only the PPT, but the recordings will also be shared with all the participants. So no need to worry about the material that is being discussed as a part of this program FDP. Now, one more question is there in the chat box: how we can raise the funds in private institutions for various programs under the new education policy?
Yeah, everything depends on the very financial support, and we have suffered a lot because of the lack of the very funds, I have experienced it. But there are two things I would like to mention here in this context. Number one, the government of India is prepared to spend more on higher education. Perhaps again, the provision will be doubled in future there. That is a kind of welcoming gesture. We principals were fighting with the very government of India and government of Maharashtra just to, I think, increase the very funds for higher education. But our efforts were in vain in those days. Now again, NEP 20 has come forward, and therefore I am very happy that the government is providing the very funds needed for the very development there on one hand. Secondly, government is aware that all the expenditure cannot be provided by the government only, and therefore the government has got some other ways and means also. There are great institutions like Tata, Birla, and again some other great industrialists, and they have their own independent institutions and they are not dependent on the government aid. That will continue. That will be continued here. There are so many religious institutions also in the very south, maybe in the very north also. And they are having their own independent financial support and they are faring well. So this practice will have to be continued. And then whenever there is some kind of a thing, scanty funds and the quality is there, but the funds are not available, then the government will come forward. The state government will also come forward and again provide the necessary financial support. The picture is not yet very clear. We are, I think, we are waiting for the very detailed instructions from the government of India, from the Ministry of Education. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. There have been some questions relating to a very important observation you have made at the end of your presentation, and that is about, can you just elaborate about the combination of Nalanda and Harvard education that will be the focus of the development of the new education policy? Can you just elaborate? That has been the question by some of the participants.
So what is the specialty of NEP 20? I mentioned in my presentation that the arrival of British rule in India, that was, I think, a kind of departure from Indian tradition to the Western tradition. And the westernization of Indian higher education was taking place for more than 150 years. I think more than 200 years, because I think in the last 70 years, we were, I think, having the very same Western model, There was the urgent need to come back to Indian soil. And coming back to Indian values, Indian culture, Indian heritage, and Indian tradition of great knowledge. And therefore, the great traditional knowledge is to be revived again and is to be combined with the very modern knowledge of the modern great universities like Harvard. So the values of Nalanda, the systems of Nalanda, the very achievements of Nalanda, Takshashila, and the very achievement of Harvard University and other again great universities in the West or in Australia or again in Korea, in China also. China is ahead of us, And therefore, so the modern and the old, that is to be combined together. One thing is very clear. The westernization of higher education in India has created some problems. It is a kind of, I think, the effect of the departure of human values and ethical values from education. So the criminalization of politics And the criminals, white-collar criminals, are the product of the very Western higher education system. The only remedy is to go back to our own cultural heritage and ethical things we observed in the very past. And therefore, so this kind of combination of Indian heritage, Indian knowledge, Indian human values, Indian ethical traditions with the very modern science. And therefore, on one hand, the Nalanda, we have been, I think, away from Nalanda for more than 70 years. And therefore, we have lost, I think, our own sense of tradition. And we have lost, I think, the very contribution made by Nalanda and Takshashila. Of course, again, I know, because these things cannot be revived here again, because the time has changed very rapidly. But in education, there must be something which should never be changed. The education must change with the very, I think, time, with the very era, with the very development of science. But there is something central in the very higher education which should not be, I think, which should not be changed, which should be retained. And what should be retained in higher education is the ethical values of human life. And therefore, the Nalanda. Nalanda is symbolic thing, you know. It is a symbol of our own ancient culture and again ethical tradition. And therefore, the modern symbol is Harvard. And the old symbol of India is Nalanda. And therefore, the combination there. And that is the core, that is the very foundation on which the entire building of NEP 20 is built. Thank you.
Yes, sir, we do agree that new education policy takes into account the philosophy of blending the past with the present and the future, and that is the reason I think that makes we can say you have made an observation about the combination of Nalanda as well as Harvard. Thank you very much, sir, for the excellent observation. Now, some of the participants are would like to clarify if there is something in the new education policy you have come across with reference to Divyang students or special kids. This query has been asked by Fernandez Joseph Long. So anything, sir, in your reading of the new education policy you have come across with reference to Divyang children and special kids?
Divyang?
Special children.
Differently able. Yes. It is, I think, a very important thing to note that in the last 15 years, UGC has been taking care of the very differently disabled students. And therefore, there have been some rules and regulations made by UGC also. When we, I think, built a new buildings, you know, so the ramps should be there and the facilities of library and etc. There should be, I think, provided to such students there. And that kind of care will be taken henceforth also in future. I think it is a good thing that the authorities they have paid a very serious attention to the development of the educational development of the great differently disabled students there. I think this is a very good thing, you know.
Yes, sir. I think in the new education policy as well as in the accreditation framework, number of parameters have been included to take care about the educational facilities being more accessible to the Divyang also. I think that is what sir is actually indicating. Now, sir, some of the participants want you to just throw more light upon the concepts of the future plan which you introduced, that is Quest and Equip.
Yeah.
Some idea, greater, more detailed explanation about Quest and Equip concept, which the government is likely to focus more in the coming days.
There is a very scanty information available at this point. Our, I think, Education Minister, Nishank Pokhriyal, so he has declared, I think I have read it in Indian Express, that the government of India, especially Minister of Education, they are preparing the two documents. The two documents will give you the entire idea of the implementation of NEP 20. Number one is Quest, and that document will be dealing with the primary and again secondary and higher secondary education. And equip is the document. I think it is only contemplated by the minister. And the equip document will give you the complete idea of implementation of NEP 20 in the field of higher education. But one more thing is there. So the drafting of the equip document will depend on the cooperation of the states. You know, education is the very subject occurring in the very common list, you know, the center and the state. And therefore, I have mentioned again, perhaps again you might have noticed that it is necessary for the first time for all the state governments to establish their own state councils of higher education. Unless the state councils of higher education are established, how can there be any dialogue between the center and the states? And therefore, the first step is the formation of the state higher education centers or again committees. And then the center will have some kind of dialogue. And after that dialogue, after receiving the very suggestions and recommendations of the state governments, then only the drafting of equip will be there. And therefore, it will take some time. It depends on the efficiency of the states. And therefore, the states should take some initiative there. I think Karnataka is the very state that has taken a very, I think, immediate steps for the implementation of NEP 20. I think that some universities, research universities, and again, high-level teaching autonomous colleges are being established. Some kind of mechanism is already there. The task force is already established by the government of Karnataka, and they are, I think, proceeding further there. And therefore, let us wait for the very, I think, publication of the very document equipped by the government of India, and then only we shall be able to know so what government is contemplating and how the things will take place in future.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Trying to emphasize on the future, the documents and the future, the institutions which are likely to emerge, which are going to regulate the education sector in our country. Thank you very much, sir. There are one or two more questions we'll take since we have another 3-4 minutes to complete the session. A question from Mrs. Arya Ankalikar. Sir, with your experience, can you suggest how the academicians can gear up to the new education policy 2020? Some tips for the new academicians so that they'll be able to face the challenge and make the best use of this new education policy.
It's a very good question, you know. I have been all the way striving very hard to come to request you to come forward and to make your own significant contribution to the development of NEP 20. Number one, there are two very important agencies, you know. Number one, the academic people, and secondly, the bureaucrats. And I would like to mention one or two very important things. The very first question is the formation of the very curriculum, the new curriculum, especially the curriculum in the context of multidisciplinary systems. So collaborations, multidisciplinary systems, and again the global scenario in the field of every subject, and again in the context of the very syllabi or the curriculum, that is to be taken into consideration. And therefore, even the ODL should be reformed. Who is going to reform it? Who is going to, I think, give some upliftment to the very curriculum designed in the very programs of ODL there? It is academia. And therefore, the curriculum the reformation is a major issue, and only the academic people can do it. No, I think, the merchants and the political people or again the common man will come forward. It is the sole duty and the responsibility of the academic people to have some reformation in the very curriculum there. Number one. Secondly, the administration is equally important. Being a principal for 19 years, I know that only the academic development will not do, because the administration is equally important. Unfortunately, the part of administration has been ignored by some people in the last 70 years. And therefore, very efficient administrators, they are required now. And therefore, those who run the universities and colleges in the field of administration, they should come forward to design new procedures, new rules and regulations, new systems to implement the NEP 20. And at the same time, there should be some kind of meaningful dialogue between the top bureaucrats and the top academicians in this country. And therefore, I think I said just now, all the bureaucrats and the academicians need to come together, sit together, think together, plan together, and act together. And that is the very requirement of NEP 20. Anything else?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. That is, you are emphasizing a coordinated effort among the policymakers, academicians, as well as the politicians. The regulatory authorities, the academicians, as well as the implementers all should have a coordinated approach. And that is what I think sir is actually emphasizing. Thank you, sir, for your excellent answer. So let me take the last question for this morning session. This question is posed by Aradhana Malhotra. Apologies from the organizer's point of view. We don't follow the procedure of unmuting and then the participant asking the questions and then muting him, because this is leading to some kind of a distraction. So we encourage the participants to just put their questions on chat box so that we can pose it to the resource person. One last question for this session. Sir, is there any point of concern in new education policy regarding the faculty and teachers in the private institutions?
Yeah. The number of teachers in the education institutions will have to be increased. And the private institutions and the government institutions, this kind of difference, I think, will not have any, I think, new meaning there in the very new context there. All those who are in the system, they will be there, and some additions will be there. And very important thing is that all of them will be governed by the same rules and regulations. And therefore, those who are working in the private institutions, especially I think on the CHB basis, I hope that this system will be abolished very soon. And all the teaching fraternity will be on equal footage and will enjoy the I think equal service conditions and the pay scales there. Unless and until this is done, then the policy will not have any kind of success. And therefore, to ensure the grand cooperation of each and every teacher, and again, the man working in the system, I think his personal things, and again, the pay scales and other things, again, the other service conditions should be entirely modified and again bring on the very same level there. And that will be done. Because I think I know that it was NAC who has recommended the central and again the state governments to abolish this system of ACHB, clock hour basis, and again to appoint full-time faculty whenever there is a sufficient workload there. So this has been a question of debate, for a long time. And this question will have to be solved by the government of India. And I know that the government of India will look after it. And again, these questions again will no more be, I think, giving some trouble to all of us. We shall be having a good teaching fraternity together, enjoying the very same conditions there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I request the participants to keep their questions for the next sessions. Due to the shortage of time for this session, we shall be ending this session with a formal vote of thanks. I, Dr. T. Vijay Sharma, on behalf of the organizing team of CSIBER, I am extremely grateful to Dr. H. V. Deshpande for giving an excellent and comprehensive view of the new education policy. We all know that new education policy 2020 cannot be understood in isolation. So he has given a complete overview about the pre-independence evolution of the educational institutions. At the same time, the number of committees which have been set up by the government in the post-independence period till 2020, their working limitations, their contributions have been actually reviewed, and most importantly, sir has rightly given us very important keywords of these new education policies, which is most important for all the people, as all the academicians, like academic administrators as well as the faculty working in the new environment, educational environment, have to understand some of the key some of the key words of the new education policies. I can say these are the key takeaways which sir wants all of us to remember, and that happens to be that going away from the affiliation system. So that means the affiliation system which we have been working for so many decades will be not be existing. Secondly, every institution will has to be in a kind of a multidisciplinary institution, and cluster wise education system will be encouraged. Similarly, the concept of credit bank will be very much implemented for the benefit of the students, so that they are not restricted only to the institutions where they are actually enrolled, but they can pick up the credits from other specialized institutions, so that they'll be able to go as per their, they can chalk out or they design their academic career as per their likes and as per their talents. Similarly, holistic development, value-based education to develop global citizens has been some of the key issues which sir has actually pointed out. And at the same time, he also highlighted some of the institute or regulatory institutions which are going to come up, such as the National Research Foundation, National Skill Quality Framework, and the concept of graded autonomy. So every as far as the new education policy is concerned, it appears that the government of India and the higher education bodies want to visualize each and every education institution in as a separate entity, self-sufficient entity in terms of offering the education curriculum, in terms of raising the funds, and in terms of providing quality education. Similarly, here sir has also pointed out some of the various ambiguities and limitations as far as the new education policy is concerned. The role of new education policy, the process of graded autonomy has been highlighted. So all in all, I find that sir has given us in an hour's presentation the entire framework review of the past, the present, and the future of the new education policy. We are really lucky that sir has accepted our invitation to share his knowledge of 75 years of working in the educational field with the participants of the Atal program, Atal FDP program. Last but not the least, just today morning, as sir arrived, he shared a very good news with us that NAC Bangalore, National Assessment and Accreditation Council Bangalore, has accepted his book for publication, and the title of this book happens to be New Approaches to Academic and Administrative Audits of the College. We all as academicians know there is no standardized format for academic and administrative audits in colleges and universities. Every college and university has its own format for deciding the academic and or performing the annual academic and administrative audit. So sir has come out with a kind of a template which can be followed by all the universities and colleges in India. And since it happens to be a very valuable contribution, he has got a message from NAC Bangalore that his book will be published on behalf of NAC. Compliments and congratulations to sir on behalf of the participants as well as on behalf of the organizing team for making this publication available to the academic fraternity. I once again thank sir for giving us a very excellent idea about this new education policy. And without wasting much of your time, I'll just end this particular session and hand it over to the organizer. Thank you very much, and we'll be joining back at 12:15. Thank you very much, all the participants.
Thank you so much, sir.